the parable of the Good Samaritan follows this introduction. And it's a very interesting link between the two. And that is what Michael read to us. Those are very interesting verses that question, what should I do to inherit eternal life? And then said, what does the law say? Do the great commandment, and you will live. But that's not what I'm preaching about today. The title is The Narrow Reach. The Narrow Reach. And it is the trademark or the iconic phrase of one specific philosopher, Jewish philosopher. Does anybody have an idea which guy that is? The narrow reach. I and thou and I and it, those phrases. Okay, I'm just trying to see. All right, no, that's no problem, that's fine. Then I know I won't have too difficult questions to answer afterwards. I can ad-lib a bit. I like working at the fair. As I've said, it gives me something to fill my week with, something to do. But I like working at the fair for other reasons as well. The first one is that I see people there that I don't see in the meeting house. And I have a captive audience because they cannot leave their post. They have to be there so we can have a good conversation. And that's all good. I also enjoy working there. But I don't think the position that I more or less fell into, that I'm really suited for that, and that is the position of cook. I think I just fell into it because there are no important decisions to be made when you have a good first cook. And they were just looking for brawn, somebody that can move big pots around and lift it high enough and do it for a long enough period. And I started cooking with Connie. Sounds like a TV series, Cooking with Connie. And I'm not quite suitable, I think, as I said, for the enterprise, and Rob Hart is also cut out of similar wood, like Connie. They are very precise. For instance, when you make mashed potatoes, you need so many scoops of potatoes, you add so much water, you stir it like this, you can serve it in time. There are strict guidelines. Knowledge beforehand is exact and precise, and you have to follow that. Otherwise, you end up with difficulties. People at the counter becoming grumpy, saying the customers are struggling to get the stuff down. It's too dry, or it's too sloppy, or this or that. So you have to follow the proven and existing knowledge to the T, otherwise you are in trouble. I tried to do that, but I'm better at making gravy. And I'll reveal my secrets, Connie, so I'll be under the gun from now on with gravy. But one shift when Connie wasn't there, and the guy that was cooking with me knew less than I did, we ended up not having the ingredients for some reason that was supposed to be there. So we had to ad-lib. We had to make gravy up and innovate because we did not have a choice. We went to a place where the end result was not disclosed yet. It was something that was there, but it still had to happen and had to be revealed. Fortunately, nobody has sued us thus far. Nobody passed away or ended up in hospital. So the end result was palatable, and actually I think it was very good gravy. And I'm trying to construct an analogy here, and I don't think it's a very good analogy, but at least I tried. For the philosophy and the views, the approach of the Jewish scholar Martin Buber. Fascinating scholar, and if you ever have an irrepressible urge to read philosophy, that is one that you should read. It's always relevant, no matter what time you find yourself in, but I think it's especially relevant for the time that we live in. He's a contemporary scholar, passed away not too long ago, and the title of the sermon is also the title of what he himself said, this is my approach. He said, I often tell my friends, my approach is that of the narrow ridge. The narrow ridge. He said, I don't want to exist, and I don't exist, and he called it the upland of a system of certainties with absolute knowledge that you work from. So that's not where I find myself, making these statements about knowledge that is absolute and absolutely certain as well. He said, no, I try to walk on the narrow ridge that exists between the gulfs of opposing perspectives and views, where the only surety is that the knowledge that will be revealed is yet undetermined. That narrow ridge where nothing is certain except that what will be revealed is yet unknown. And he put that forward in a book called, with the title, I think it was 1947, the title Man to Man. In feminist days, one can also say woman to woman, I suppose, and all the other categories that you want to bring in, person to person. And he speaks to it from the basis of his philosophy, where he says, as people, we have to exist in relationships that can be typified and described by I and thou, not by I and it. He says, because when you say I and it, you objectify the other. It becomes a thing just like a concept. And when you enter into a conversation with someone, for instance, from the perspective of I and it, you are just exchanging your views, your concepts, and imposing that on the other person. There is no openness, there is not a willingness to make yourself vulnerable and enter into this conversation with a deep desire to arrive at a place of I and thou, where you look at the other person and you enter into that encounter from the deepest level of your humanity in all vulnerability and openness. So that what happens in that kind of encounter is something unique, something new, something creative and innovative, like the gravy I dished up to unsuspecting customers that day at the fair. Something new, something innovative. But that narrow reach of Buber is not an easy place where, he says, we smooth over the differences. It is not, let's just make nice and get along, and all will be well. No, Buber says, on that narrow ridge, you hold what is seemingly contradictory. You put it on the table. You bring it to the surface. You say, these are the perspectives, the contradictions, the paradoxes, and you hold it in that tension in a creative way with the end result that is life-giving. Now that's a mouthful. That is a mouthful. But I think it is extremely valuable. And it is something to consider. Something to consider in the time that we live. I think Jesus was a master of that approach of Buber. In the passage that we read, observe what is happening. A teacher of the law comes to him with a trick question. Because they were perceiving Jesus as being opposed to the law and anything that is traditional, and that Jesus was attacking the Jewish religion. And the teacher of the Jewish law approached him asking with that trick question, what is the greatest commandment? To trick him into making a mistake so that they can nail him. Declare him a blasphemer and get him out of the way. What did Jesus do? He didn't camouflage the differences. He also didn't throw tradition and everything that existed that was good in the Jewish religion out the window and said, no, we must start from afresh, and this is the way to go, a totally new way, forget what you have. He walked on that narrow ridge, held the contradictions that were seemingly paradoxical together, and he said, what does the law say? And he applied the love of God, brought that into the equation and say, in the love of God, we can walk this narrow ridge where we take from the past what is good. We take the Jewish law and on that narrow ridge, we give it its true meaning. In the love of God, we are able to make God's will our priority, and in the love of God, we are able to embrace our neighbor and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And that, Jesus said, is life-giving. Parker Palmer, a sociologist, I think is in California. He speaks about holding political differences and the tension between those creatively. Very similar to Buber, saying these political differences in our time, we should be able to hold it together creatively. And he speaks about the heart of democracy, and he said, as Americans, we should be able to hold it together and have a civil conversation without compromise and without camouflage of differences, so that we do not destroy our democracy, and that we further the common good. He applies it to the political arena and to American society. I want to ask for an application for us within the macro environment of this divisive political climate that we are all embedded in and that we all have to deal with our differences. As God's people, to walk with Jesus on that narrow ridge, in God's love, being embraced by that and entering into God's love, and because of that, expressing God's love, in holding our differences and the paradoxes and the contradictions and the huge differences, to hold that together, that tension that becomes a creative tension when we embrace each other in God's love, so that we create something new, so that we, as God's people, also live in a life-giving way. Buber was right, I think, when he said, when you open yourself in an I-thou conversation and a way of being in the world, that you can only do that if you are willing to accept the risk of becoming vulnerable and even of being open to accept something new, also being willing to be part of creating something new. When I look at our congregation, I think we are uniquely positioned to walk that narrow ridge. I listen to people with widely different perspectives. I hear them. And I have tried the last 3 years since I first realized how toxic the public discourse has become, try to say we should talk to each other. We should do so in a civil way, without camouflaging the differences. I think we are doing quite well, actually. And I want to give the congregation credit. Not all of us. But there is a significant part of the congregation without the underlying philosophy of Martin Buber and the I, thou, and the I, it, perhaps built into their framework of thinking, that are doing exactly that. That have the willingness to become vulnerable, that have the willingness to be open, to listen in an I-thou relationship where you open yourself fully to the other. I see the green shoots of a new identity for this congregation on this narrow ridge. Last Saturday, the church council and a few other leaders met for a full Saturday, focused, working hard, looking towards the future of the church. And when Kristen, the moderator, said, all right, we're meeting having our regular meeting on Wednesday following the Sunday as well, I thought, well, tough acts, good luck. You won't see them. And they were there, each one of them. Again, and we met till after 10 that night. I see when Amy calls people, and I don't think she's that good a salesperson.
I have other skills.
Yeah, she has other skills. I'm making the point that Amy was asking people if they would like to read in the service, be a reader. We have over 50 people that said yes, they want to do that, which is astounding for me. I thought if we ended up with 15, not 50, it would be healthy. If I look at the fair, even with the average age of the congregation increasing, and the physical demands of the fair staying the same or becoming heavier to bear, we still manage to fill the vast majority of those slots. And so forth and so forth. I can carry on. I want to invite you to continue on this journey on the narrow ledge. Because if we walk that with integrity and in truth, if we walk that in God's love, we will find that that approach of walking on the narrow ledge will reveal to us a huge tract of common ground that is yet undisclosed, but that I'm sure and that I've seen and that I've experienced that is there. So let us walk as God's people in God's love, loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. The neighbor here in the pew next to us and in every aspect of the life of this community, but also the neighbor in worldwide context. Then will we create something. Congregational Church of Topsfield. That is a thing of beauty. Something to behold. That congregation of the narrow reach that brings God's light, God's love, God's life to each other and to the world. Let us walk that narrow reach. Amen.